When I was 18 years old at Florida College, I preached my first sermon. I don't remember what it was about. I'm sure nobody else does either. I'm sure it was horrible. But not too long after that, a friend of mine said, I've got an opportunity for us to go to Merritt Island, Florida, and I'm going to teach the class, and you're going to preach the sermon. I said, great, let's do that. He said, so you come up with the topic, and we'll go, I'll teach the class, you preach the sermon, whatever you want to preach about. 18 years old, freshman in college. Guess what I chose for a topic? Women. Well, yeah, it was sort of like parenting, where I knew everything until I had kids, then I knew nothing. What made an 18-year-old freshman in college male think that he ought to be preaching on women, I will never know. I had no idea how foolish that was. Now I know how foolish it is, and you're making me do it again. I don't like this. I'm not fond of this. I'm not comfortable. I just want you to know that there's nothing that I ever preach or teach on that I'm more uncomfortable with than speaking to Christian women. But apparently you need it, because I can't tell you the number of men who have come up to me and said, you need to let them have it. He said, you need to both barrels, man. They need it. They're desperate for it. They've got to be corrected. They've got to give it to us. I'm going to give it to you this morning. I've been asked to. That's been my task, and so that's just what we're going to do. So Joshua 15 is our text. If you want to turn, then I hope that you will. Turn to Joshua chapter 15. That's going to be our text for this morning. Let's read it. And we're going to start to read it, and you're going to think, this is the wrong place. He's in the wrong, not the wrong text. Joshua 15 is our text for the morning as we think about the life and the character and the actions of a believing woman. And our text is going to be Joshua 15. This, of course, is a description of the conquest of Canaan by the Israelites after they have come out of Egypt. And this particular section has to do with the allotment to the tribe of Judah, in particular, a man named Caleb. And Caleb, of course, was one of the two faithful spies who believed that they could take the land. And because of their faith, when everybody else disbelieved, they were actually able to live through the wilderness wandering, and they're able to go into Canaan. So this is Caleb. And Caleb is being given his land, and he's in the process of acquiring his land by driving out the inhabitants. He's already driven out a bunch of people in Joshua 15, verses 13 and 14, but apparently now he's ready for retirement, and so he's going to outsource the conquest to somebody else. And so here's what happens. This is Joshua 15 and verse 15. Then he went up from there against the inhabitants of Debir. Now the name of Debir formerly was Kiriath Sepher. And Caleb said, the one who attacks Kiriath Sepher and captures it, I will give him Achsah, my daughter, as a wife. Othniel, the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, captured it. So he gave him Achsah. So Caleb gave Othniel Achsah, his daughter, as a wife. It came about that when she came to him, she persuaded him to ask her father for a field. So she goes to her husband Othniel and says, you need to ask my father for a field. So she alighted from the donkey, and Caleb, her father, said to her, what do you want? Then she said, give me a blessing. Since you have given me the land of the Negev, give me also springs of water. So he gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. I know that I'm starting off on the wrong foot with modern American Christian women by choosing to use a passage that describes the giving of a daughter in marriage as a reward for battle. I know that this, at first glance, this is not a good choice of text. To deal with a text that features, as this one does, an arranged marriage. Although I have to tell you, as the father of a daughter, I'm all for it. I have a daughter. And if we could go back to the days of arranged marriage, if I could pick the husband, if I could go through and see everybody, check their bank account, what do you do for a living? If I could do all that stuff, I'm all for it. If you have a daughter, you know what I'm talking about. You're all for arranged marriage, and don't say you're not. But we don't do things that way these days, and it's a little off-putting. I understand that. This is it can be offensive to talk about this case where we have a woman who's given in marriage as a reward for victory in battle. That's a little offensive. But I think that you're really going to like Achsah. The women who are here, I think you're really going to like her. And I think you're going to really like her as a role model. And I know that there are some lessons here that are valuable to Christian women in their desire to live a life that's pleasing to God. I have to tell you that this account is considered so important by the Holy Spirit that this account is in the Bible twice, almost word for word. It's here in Joshua 15, and it's also in the book of Judges. This account is recorded twice. I always say that the Bible only has to say something once for us to know it's important. If it says it twice, you better pay attention. And this passage is like that. So let's talk about it. So the basic facts of the account are this. Caleb is conquering his land. Is this microphone okay? I feel like I'm getting a lot of blowback and stuff, so let me know if this is not working. Caleb is given some land, but being given the land and possessing land, two different things. And so Caleb has to go through and defeat the people living in the land and actually possess the land. And he does some of that, but then he says, I'm tired. I want to sit on the porch and rock. I want to listen to George Jones. I don't want to fight anymore. And so I need somebody to conquer that city for me. And if they do, I'll give them my daughter Achsah. And so Othniel does that. Othniel, of course, would later become a judge. Othniel does that. He receives Achsah for a wife. Now, they've got to homestead somewhere. They've got to live somewhere. And so Caleb gives them a piece of land in an area of Palestine called the Negev. It's in southern Palestine. The problem with it is it's very, very dry. It's extremely dry. So Caleb gives his son-in-law and daughter a piece of land that you can't grow anything on. It's too dry. Well, that may be okay in Raleigh. I mean, so you have some brown grass and you got a high water bill, but this is an agricultural society. If you can't grow something, you can't survive. And so she goes to her husband, and the details are a little unclear, but she goes to her husband and says, you need to go ask my dad for some help here. We can't live on this land. So at some point, either Othniel didn't do it, or I don't know what happened, but Achsah goes herself to her father and says, we need some help. This land is too dry. We need some water. Give me some water. And so he gives her, notice in verse 19, he gives her both upper and lower springs. Okay, so do the basic facts of the story make sense, right? We understand what happened. And so that's the account. Now I want to take some lessons from that. And I think that there are three things that we can learn from the life of Achsah. The first thing that I think that we learn from the life of Achsah that is important for a believing woman today, a Christian woman, is that Achsah, though she is clearly a strong woman, she is in some ways an independent woman. She's a very strong, powerful woman. But she is a woman who lives within the gender roles of her society and what God has established. She is a woman who does not rebel against. It was within her father's authority to give her in marriage. That was his right. And in her marriage, when something needs to be done, she first tries to work through her husband. She says to her husband, we have a problem. You need to take care of it. So this is a woman who respects her role and her place within the gender norms that God has created. She doesn't rebel against it. Caleb doesn't go to her and say, I've given you in marriage to Othniel because he defeated a city. And she says, are you crazy? I'm not being given to anybody. If I don't love him, I ain't marrying him. She doesn't do that. She doesn't rebel against the authority of her husband and say, you big knucklehead, don't you know that this land is too dry? Do I have to do everything myself? Get out of my way. Let me handle it. She's a woman who is content to work within the gender sort of norms that God has created. There's a bumper sticker that I see. I see a lot of bumper stickers that I don't like. I'm easily triggered. I didn't know it was called that, of course, till recently. Now we got the triggering language, right? I didn't know I was easily triggered, but I'm easily triggered. And bumper stickers trigger me badly. And so I'm always hesitant to talk about bumper stickers that trigger me because I'm afraid I'll walk out later and see one in the parking lot. So if you have one of these, I'm sorry, but really not sorry. But there's a bumper sticker I see all the time that says, well-behaved women. Anybody know this one? Well-behaved women rarely make history. Well, that may be true, but making history really shouldn't be the ultimate goal. Making history should not be the ultimate thing that anybody is after. Eve made history. Eve was a history-making woman. And what she and Adam did by making history has jacked it up for all of us. I've heard this week as I've talked to you and interacted with you, so many of you have had major health problems, heart attacks and knee issues and back issues. And so many of you are dealing with these really serious health problems. And some of you are dealing with difficulties and problems and issues in your families, really serious things that really bother you. Why is all of that happening? Because Eve made history. Making history should not be the ultimate goal. Making God happy should be the ultimate goal. I want to share something with you from Luke. We're going to keep basing our lesson in Joshua 15, but I want to look at something with you from Luke, from the life of perhaps the most famous woman who ever lived. This woman might be, talk about somebody who made history. Mary might be the most famous woman in the world, and I want you to know how this famous history-making woman thought about herself in relation to the will of God. Luke chapter 1, when the angel comes to Mary. Now, there's an intended contrast here between the angel going to Zacharias, right, the father of John the Baptist. He went to Zacharias and said, here's what's going to happen. And Zacharias was like, well, how am I going to know that? I can't know that. That doesn't sound right. And he was rendered mute because he didn't believe. But the angel comes to Mary, most likely 15 years old, maybe, very young. And the angel comes to Mary, and he says that she's going to conceive by the power of the Holy Spirit, and she's going to have a child. She's not married yet. She's engaged, but she is unmarried. She's a single girl in a culture, in a society where pregnancy in that situation could mean a death sentence. And the angel comes to her, and he says, this is what's going to happen. And listen to what she says. Luke 1:38. Behold the bondslave of the Lord. Mary is not concerned with rebellion, or she's not concerned with reputation. She's not concerned with being a big shot or making history. She's concerned with her relationship to God as a slave. May it be done to me according to your word. I'm submitting to you. I'm surrendering to you. I'm giving myself to you. The most famous woman in the world. That was her attitude. An attitude of submission, complete and total submission to the will of God. That was Mary, and she's a wonderful example to believing women today. Over in 1 Timothy chapter 2, I want to notice that for just a moment. Because there's an argument that's sometimes made, and listen, I try to be really sensitive. I try to be careful. I think all of us do. I think all men do. I think all preachers, all elders. I think men need to be just extremely careful when we deal with issues of gender roles and the headship of the husband and leadership in the church. I think it pays to be sensitive. I think it pays to be careful. He said, well, Paul just put it out there. Well, I'm not Paul, and you're not Paul, and we're not inspired by the Holy Spirit. I think we need to be sensitive, and I try to be that. But the Bible is very clear when it comes to the roles and the norms of men and women. It just is. And we can accept that or we can reject that. We can do it or not do it. That's our choice. But we don't need to take the attitude that the Bible is unclear, or we're not really sure what it says, or things have changed because now it's 2026 instead of 1956, and people say, you're trying to take us back to the 50s. No, if we only go back to the 50s, that's not far enough. We have to go back to the beginning. And here's what Paul says about that. 1 Timothy chapter 2. He's talking about the way things work in the church. We know that from 1 Timothy 3:15. I write to you, in case I'm delayed, I write to you so that one may know how to conduct himself in the household of God, which is the church of the living God. This is about how we do church. And here's what he says. Verse 8, 1 Timothy 2, verse 8. Therefore, I want the men in every place to pray, lifting up holy hands, without wrath and dissension. In the church, it is the men who lead, the men who pray, the men who speak. It's the men who lead. I want the men to do that. Verse 9. Likewise, I want women to adorn themselves with proper clothing, modestly and discreetly, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly garments. I think it's interesting what we do with that idea of modest apparel. Normally, when we think about and preach about and harp on and pound on and yell about modest apparel, we're talking about wearing too little. And that's a good thing. We need to talk about that. We need to be sure that both men and women are wearing enough clothing. That's important. People blow that off, and even a lot of Christian people blow that off. Well, if I wear something and that makes somebody have impurity, that's their problem, not mine. Well, it's both of our problems. People ought to wear enough clothes. They just should. This passage isn't about that. When this passage is talking about modest apparel, it's not talking about wearing too little. It's talking about wearing too much. And I think it's interesting that when it comes to how we go to church, we don't worry about overdressing, and that's exactly what he's talking about. He's talking about going to church and dressed in a way that attracts everybody's attention. Everybody's looking at you, and wow, look at that, and isn't that amazing? Look at that. And that's what he's talking about. So that's why he says it's not about the braided hair and gold and pearls and costly garments. Fine to wear that stuff. Ladies, you don't have to be like, oh, I shouldn't have worn the gold necklace today. Or I shouldn't have worn this dress that I got at, Saks Fifth Avenue. Nothing wrong with that. But it can't be about that. Instead, he says in verse 10, it is about your good works, as is proper for women making claim to godliness. Verse 11, a woman must quietly receive instruction. He's talking about in the church with entire submissiveness. I do not allow a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man, but to remain quiet. Now, why is that? Because of culture? Because that's Roman culture? Because it's Jewish culture? No, because it goes back to Adam and Eve. At the very beginning with Adam and Eve, God made Adam first to send a message that male headship is the norm. It just is that way. And we can fight it. We can not like it. We can loosen up on it. We can liberalize on it. But it's been this way from the very beginning. This is God's will. It just is. And as believers, it is our job to accept it. Now, I think one thing we don't do in the church very well is talk more about what women can do, because we're talking so much about what they can't do. I think we could do better about that. I think a lot of times Christian women, particularly young Christian women, walk away with the idea that being a Christian woman is all about knowing what you can't do. And I think that's terrible. It has always been the case that women have had very significant roles among the people of God. Miriam was a prophetess. Deborah was a judge and a prophetess. Women have always had highly significant roles, but there have always been things in the economy of God that women cannot do. They could not be kings. Obviously, they couldn't be monarchs. They couldn't be priests. Because God has always had clearly defined roles about what it is that men and women can and can't do. This has not changed in the New Covenant. When Paul said in Galatians 3, there is neither male nor female, he wasn't saying there's not roles anymore. Because the same guy said what we read in 1 Timothy. He said in 1 Corinthians 14 about women remaining silent in the church. It's the same guy. The same one who said in Ephesians 5 about the headship of the man and the submission of the wife. Roles have not been abolished in the New Covenant. We still have them. But we've got to be careful, I think, about how we deal with them. I think we need to be sensitive about that. And I think we need to deal carefully with that. And this is true for men and women. I think a lot of men are more than happy to abdicate leadership. I think a lot of men are more than happy to abdicate leadership. A lot of men are more than happy to not carry the responsibility. We want the perks, the recliner, the remote, picking where we're going to eat. So we want the perks, right? We want the good stuff. But when it comes to making those hard decisions and we've got to step up and be the man, sometimes we're like, oh, whatever you want, hon. She's like, oh, thanks. Right? So we don't want to abolish or minimize those things at all. So the first thing we see about Achsah in Joshua 15 is that Achsah was a woman, she's very strong. She's very powerful, but she was a woman who lived within the norms that God had created. But I want you to notice this in verses 18 and 19 of Joshua 15, that she takes bold and courageous and appropriate action in the interest of her family. Achsah is a woman who takes bold action on behalf of her family in an appropriate way. Her father, for some reason, her father has given us this land you can't grow anything on because it's too dry. And when it is necessary, Achsah goes herself. When we read that Achsah goes to her father, gets off the donkey, and tells him what she wants, that was a radical move. In that culture, that would have been shocking. People who were standing around would have gone, she just got off that donkey and talked to her dad. Oh, no, she didn't. They would have been shocked about that. But because she knew it had to be done for the welfare of her family, she was willing to do it. She took bold action on behalf of her family. This is an urgent matter that demands her attention. For some reason, her husband's not coming through. And so she's going to be the one to take care of it. Her family's welfare is at stake. She will be sure that her family is taken care of. In 1947, in a very poor neighborhood in San Francisco, California, a young black child was born into poverty. And as he grew, because of the extreme poverty of the family, this little boy, James, developed a disease called rickets, which is caused by a lack of vitamin D. His family could not afford proper nutrition. And so he gets this disease called rickets, which in him meant that the development of his legs was not what it ought to have been. His legs were not what they should be. And so his mother took him to the doctor, and the doctor said, we got two options. We can break his legs and reset them. We can do surgery, or we can fit him for leg braces. But you're going to have to do one of those two things, or he's not going to be able to walk. They couldn't afford either one of those things. And so his mother took James home, and she looked at him, and she looked at his legs, and she looked at his feet, and she thought about things, and she worked some things out, and she took his shoes, and she put his shoes on the wrong feet. And she took some household materials and she made homemade braces for his legs. They couldn't do surgery. They couldn't afford braces. So she figured out how to fix his legs. She did it herself. And she put those braces on his legs and she switched the shoes on his feet. And James grew. And eventually, before James, or as his full name was, Orenthal James, before he became the most celebrated defendant in criminal trial history, Orenthal James, O.J. Simpson, won the Heisman Trophy in college football in 1968. He was the first running back to rush for 2,000 yards for the Bills in 73. And he was the NFL MVP in 1975. He was a running back. He was a football player who made his living with his legs that his mother fixed for him when he was a boy. Why was he able even to walk? Because his mother saw a need and took bold, creative action for her family. This is what Aksa does. This is how she responds to this need. Now, I want to ask you, believing women, what is there right now in your family that is a need or a problem or a crisis that needs your bold attention? What is there in your family that needs your attention, that needs you as a strong, powerful, Spirit-filled, Bible-believing woman to step up in your family and start to work on? It could be many things. It could be family conflict. There could be in your family right now a conflict or conflicts between family members. Kind of hard to believe. We all get prettied up. Some of us prettier than others, but we all get prettied up and we come to church, and it doesn't matter how badly we're fighting and yelling and screaming, and the kids are yelling and the wife is crying and the husband's shouting, and we pull in the parking lot and okay, we got to get ourselves together. Dry the eyes, get the makeup straight, get the hair straight. Husband fixes his tie, kids are calmed down. Now we can go in and look like the perfect family. It's hard to believe sometimes when you sit in church with people that there can be those kinds of issues, but you might be having some conflict in your family right now. Turn back for a minute to Genesis chapter 37. One of the interesting things about this is a very familiar text in Genesis 37, right? The beginning of the story of Joseph. But I want you to notice what's happening in the family of Joseph. In the family of Joseph, Joseph is 17 years old. This is Genesis 37 and verse 2. Things are not good in the household of Joseph and his father, Jacob, and his brothers. Things are very difficult. Now, you know, you're alerted to the fact, even if you didn't know it, you're alerted to the fact that we're going to have some problems here. Genesis 37:2. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's what? His father's wives. Now, you know we're going to have a problem. Because anytime we violate and go against and rebel against the will of God for marriage, which is what? One man, one woman for life. That's his will. That's what he intended. Jacob has gone against that. Jacob has several wives. That's a problem. And so we know that there's going to be an issue here. Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. He's a tattletale, typical baby of the family, telling on everybody else, making everybody angry. Verse 3, sorry if you're the baby of the family, I'm sorry, but This is what it says. It's right there in the Bible. Verse 3, now Israel, Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him what most translations say is a varicolored or multicolored or coat of many colors. When it seems to be literally that the term here actually means a full-length garment. A garment that went all the way to his ankles and all the way to his wrist. And you say, why is that a big deal? Well, first of all, it's more expensive than regular garments, got more material, so it costs more. But the fact that it goes all the way to the ankles and all the way to the wrist means that the person wearing it doesn't have to work hard like everybody else. A person who wears a full-length garment doesn't have to go out and work like everybody else. When Jacob gives this garment to his son, he's sending a message. He's better than you all, and he doesn't have to work like you all have to work. And he's causing a problem with his sons because he loves this son more. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. Verse 5, he told the dream, they hated him more. Verse 8, they hated him even more. Verse 11, they're jealous of him. What do you think Sunday supper was like at the home of this family? What do you think it was like sitting around the table with all of these boys and daughters as well, parents, and they hate their brother so badly, they can't speak to him on friendly terms. They hate him. They're jealous of him. They can't stand the sight of him. What do you think it was like sitting around watching TV at night within this family? Do you think that everybody knew that there was a problem? Do you think that everybody knew that we've got some serious issues here? We've got some really bad conflict, but Jacob, the father, did nothing. Reuben, the firstborn son, did nothing. The wives, problematic as that is, the wives did nothing. What I'm saying to you is, ladies, where there is conflict in your family and your husband may not know how to deal with that, may be the source of it, may be a little uncertain about how to handle that, ladies, sometimes you have to stand up and deal with the conflict that you see within your family. That's the sort of thing that Oxa certainly would have done. Sometimes, ladies, you need to step up and deal with a situation of spiritual dryness, spiritual drift, spiritual formalism. We're a family who goes to church, but we're not really committed to God. We don't study together. We don't pray together. We don't talk about spiritual things. We're letting the world get into our home too much. And ladies, sometimes you have to be the one to step up and to deal with that and to address that and to call attention to that. Sometimes it's simply setting a different tone. Does your home ever get negative? Things at your house ever get negative? It just sometimes it seems like within our family, we have a happy family and we typically get along well and generally things are pretty good at home. But sometimes things get really negative and it seems like everybody gets negative at once, right? People start complaining and they're griping about things and sort of carping at each other and bickering with each other. Do things ever get negative? Do people ever start really complaining and it's just sort of a negative tone to your home? Ladies, sometimes you have to be the one to step up and to address that, to talk about that, to call attention to that. Sometimes that's going to have to be you. There are times in my marriage, many times, I've been married for 31. I've been married for 31 years. Obviously, still don't have it all down pat. I've been married for 31 years, and over those 31 years, there have been a tremendous number of times where I've simply dropped the ball. I just have not handled, I've not stepped up and led like I was supposed to. And there have been times that Tracy has had to speak up, which she doesn't like to do. You may have noticed she's really quiet. She doesn't like attention. And so right now she's dying inside. She doesn't like attention. She doesn't like to be the one speaking. But sometimes she has had to say, I think this needs to be dealt with. I think we're going the wrong direction here. I think this is an issue. Sometimes she just says it. Sometimes she sings it. She has what we call, myself and the children, what we call Mom's Music Ministry. And sometimes when Tracy sees that things are going the wrong direction, she'll start singing hymns to us. She'll start singing, God give us Christian homes. Or if like the kids are like saying bad things to each other, or I'm treating the kids not very well, she'll start singing, they will know we are Christians by our love, right? And so that sort of straightens us out. And so she's got a music ministry, and sometimes she's got to step up and be the one to handle things. But ladies, sometimes that just has to be you. So the final thing that I want us to notice about Achsah is that her actions paid off very, very greatly in the interest of her family. Achsah sees that we've got this patch of land that you can't grow anything on. It's too dry. We need water. And so she goes to her father and she says, we need some help. We need water. And what it says is that her father Caleb gives her both the upper springs and the lower springs. And Achsah, because of her bold action and initiative, saves her family. They couldn't live on that. But because of what she did, her family was saved. Now, what I would love to tell you is that as we continue reading through the Bible, that Achsah's children became kings and priests and prophets, that her grandchildren were business tycoons and technological innovators. But the fact is that past this account, we don't ever really run into her family again outside of Othniel, who became a judge, but we don't know anything about their kids. Outside of this, her family disappears from the Bible record. We don't know anything else about them, what they did, who they were, what their names were. And I think that's significant because, ladies, in 100 years, nobody's going to know who you were. In 100 years, ladies, nobody's going to know your name. Nobody. We know that when the last person who knew you personally dies, memory of you will die. And you say, wait a minute, I'm on Facebook. I'm going to live forever. Yeah, but nobody's going to go to your page because they don't know you're there, right? So when the last person who knew you personally dies, nobody will ever know that you lived again. Unless you've got some like genealogy nut in the family, like down the line, and they go back and, oh, there's Grandma Joan. How about that? But they don't know you. They don't know anything about you. Once you're dead and gone, and a few years have passed, you're done. Nobody knows anything about you. You're history that nobody knows. You're not even a footnote in history. Nobody's going to know who you were or what you did or even know your name. But what you did will remain. And ladies, it's so important to understand that even though you may not leave a legacy, you may not make history, you may not be enshrined somewhere, have your portrait somewhere, have your name on a monument. Once you're gone, you're gone. As far as this world is concerned. But what you did will remain. The work that you did to provide for your family, maybe to make money and contribute to the family finances, to clothe your children, to feed your children, to warm your family, to serve your family, to be a godly woman who gives teaching. The word of wisdom is on her tongue, Proverbs 31. A woman who leads by example. And you're showing your children what it means to be a Christian. When you're gone, you're gone. But what you did will remain. And it will continue. Because of you, people will be alive. People will live. Because of you, people will go to school and they'll fall in love and they'll get married and they'll have kids and they'll have families and they'll experience joy because of you. Because of you. Real men and real women who have real eternal souls will be saved. You will not know all of them. You will not know most of them. But ladies, listen, Christian women, please listen to me. Because of what you're doing, people, men and women, will be saved for eternity. Heaven will have a higher population because of you. You can't put a price tag on that. You can't value that. That's what you're doing as a believing woman. So please, we need you to continue. We need you to be the best at that than you can be. It's going to happen by the grace of God. It's going to happen by the empowerment of God. We're going to talk more about that in the next lesson and how some of that works. But ladies, there's just no way. And sometimes in the church, we do a really poor job of trying to value who you are and what you do. We don't always do a good job of that. But there is no way, believing women, there is no way that we can put a value on what you do. So we appreciate you, we love you, and we want you to know that we're here to serve you, we're here to help you, we're here to encourage you. There's no guilt like mom guilt. There's no guilt like mom guilt. None. That nobody struggles more with a lack of self-worth, a lack of a sense of achievement, more guilt than Christian moms and wives. It's just brutal. We want to help you with that. We want to support you and serve you as much as we possibly can. Thank you for what you do and know the value of it. God bless you for what you do. Thank you.